Hello, people of the internet, this is Shaky Jake, and I really need a catchphrase. If I had the difficult task of trying to rate my favourite games ever made in a list, I am positive that Pokémon Gold and Silver, alongside its enhanced third version Crystal, would be somewhere near the top of that list. When the games were originally released on the Game Boy Color, Pokémon was everywhere. I was already spending countless hours with Pokémon Red on my Game Boy Pocket, to the point where I could easily say that on a conscious level of a 7 to 8 year old mind at the time, it was the first game that I obsessively played non-stop, and it deserves a lot of credit for getting me into games and appreciating the handheld format. Naturally, when Pokémon Gold and Silver were announced, I was hyped. This was before the internet became convenient, so any magazine that I was able to get with information about them, you can bet I read them. I still remember the days before I eventually received Pokémon Gold for one wonderful Christmas. I was begging to rent a copy from Blockbuster 2 or 3 days before Christmas Day. Remember Blockbuster? Remember that place? If you do, congratulations, you had a good childhood. Anyway, to cut a long story short, after being desperate to play it, I finally got Pokémon Gold alongside a Game Boy Color for Christmas and loved it. It was one of those times where the hype lived up to my expectations, and I played over 400 hours on my original save file before the internal battery died and those 400 hours were lost. Manly tears were shed that day. I really do need to replace the internal battery for my Pokémon Gold cartridge at some point. You can bet that I'll be buying the Pokémon Gold and Silver versions on the Virtual Console like I did with Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow last year, even if it means having to dig up my 3DS instead of getting to play it on my new Nintendo Switch. Oh well, you can't have everything. Nintendo are fully aware of how much these games mean to people, and with the European re-release of which I have access to being in the UK, consumers have an option to not only buy the games on the Virtual Console, but also buy it as a physical copy. That's amazing. 2 classic games in cases with their original box art all tidied up and given a nice HD looking overcoat. What's the catch? It's not an actual physical copy in a traditional sense. And I'm saying physical copy with air quotes because this is not a physical copy of the games. I don't want to bash Nintendo completely here, as it clearly states on the boxes for both games, download code, no game card is included, alongside some additional details, so consumers know what to expect before buying. I do, however, want to discuss why I am fully against the idea of releasing a product that's ultimately a digital copy inside an empty box that's worthless after one use. Because when I originally pointed this out on Twitter, a medium where character limits can make posts difficult to fully appreciate or even understand because of the character limits, my original tweet caused a huge discussion that almost became a conflict of two sides in some cases. To me, a physical product is a product that at its core has to contain a disc or cartridge at the very least, or whatever format the actual media the product is stored on, so videotape, CD, vinyl, etc. Doesn't matter, as long as there's actually some kind of physical media inside the case. This media would be kept in the case when not used and then taken out when you want to use it. The box, case, whatever it is, it has a purpose. If you're lucky, you may get a manual included because they are scarce nowadays, and it's a huge shame that they're no longer being printed as often as 10 to 20 years ago. If you're extremely lucky, you'll get bonus tie-in media to further immerse the consumer, such as the maps that were included with the Grand Theft Auto games. That to me is a physical product. It has multiple uses, the box or the case actually gets used multiple times, etc, etc. If you get that product without any of the additional junk, as some people like to call it, but in a convenient and easy to access file, that is a digital copy. I love physical copies, and as I've gotten older, I love digital copies because they're convenient, and if I had my entire Steam library as physical copies, I'd be struggling to breathe round about now, I'd imagine. I love digital copies, but to try and do both together in an awkward collaboration is absurd. The Pokémon Gold and Silver re-releases are not physical copies because they lack any form of physical media. They do not, from my understanding, include anything else special, just a bit of paper with a download code. There is literally zero purpose to buying these versions of the games unless you want an empty box that looks pretty on a shelf. When I pointed this out on Twitter to the Nintendo of Europe account when this was first announced a few days ago, I stated the following: there is literally zero point in having physical copies of games that are digital only. I love Gold and Silver, but just the download codes. Now that last sentence doesn't entirely make sense because again, Twitter character limits can prevent you from really going in depth unless if you reply to the original post. But essentially what I was saying was, I love Gold and Silver as games, but they are not worth rebuying as physical copies now, so I'm only going to get the download codes. Within minutes, I was slated for even remotely criticising this concept. Nobody actually looked at the half positive I portrayed towards the end of my tweet. This concept of boxes with nothing ultimately inside them was the reason I stopped buying PC games physically, because why bother buying PC games physically when all I need to do is install it on Steam anyway? That was the case with my copy of AudioSurf. I bought a physical copy of it on PC, but I only used the disc once because I was still installing a file that would be used digitally forever afterwards. It's pointless. I would hate for Nintendo or any other company to adopt this method because it is ridiculous. I'll even give you a physical demonstration of what you, as a consumer, will get with this version of the Pokémon Gold and Silver re-releases. Here is my copy of Logan. It looks rather nice, doesn't it? Let's see what's inside. Oh look, there's nothing here. Just some paper with a code on. Oh, that's nice, I guess. Well, this is never going to do anything else for me now, so it's worthless. But I guess it looks pretty. Oh, who am I kidding? This is going to take up space for something that I could actually use. That is what you're going to get with the Pokémon Gold and Silver boxes. A download code that can only be used once, has nothing else inside of it unless if Nintendo decide to add any additional features, which would slightly justify the idea a little bit more besides playing on our nostalgia for two classic games, and the argument that I've never had to resort to often, but it's ultimately a waste of materials and manufacturer cost. One response my original tweet had, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, was, "I am a collector and I want digital games in a box. Speak for yourself." Now I cannot locate this tweet anymore, so this screenshot that someone else took will represent it, but I want digital games in a box translates to wanting a physical copy of the product, because digital games in a box do not exist and should not exist, because it is a huge waste and serves no purpose beyond looking nice on a shelf. Another argument that was brought up, but again has got lost or been deleted among the tweets, was that they'd rather have this than pointless merchandise like action figures or a t-shirt, for example. This was even more hilarious because I own plenty of gaming related t-shirts and I do actually use them. It's called wearing them. That alone has more use and purpose than these empty boxes do after one use. But again, I will end up repeating myself again and again if I keep trying to point out why I believe this is wrong. From what I have gathered, consumers who are mostly pro-digital love this for some reason, even though they normally do not want to have anything physical. There are many who will buy these simply because of nostalgia and how amazing these games are. I love Pokémon Gold and Silver. They're among my favourite games ever made by any developer. But I refuse to buy them in this format because it's an awful idea, and if it's heavily supported, I'm worried that Nintendo will repeat this again and again, or other developers are going to do this, and I don't want that to happen. Again, I love my products, whether they're physical or digital, but to be a digital copy masquerading as a physical copy is wrong. If I want to criticise a company for something I disagree with, even a great company like Nintendo, then that is my right. I know I'm not forced to spend my money on this, as people have tried to point out to me, but that's not the point. The point is that this is a practice that should not be supported. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.